Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the DC Capstone Report podcast. And thanks for all of our listeners out there continuing to tune in each week. Today on the podcast, we're going to take a look at an update on spring practice, on where things have been for the first couple of weeks of the spring practice. In our second segment, we're going to take a look at what to expect from the upcoming scrimmage that will be held this coming Saturday, March the 30th. And then in our final segment, we're going to take a look at some players who we've noticed or been noticed in the first few weeks of spring practice and some of the notable things that have come out of the first couple of weeks of spring practice.
The DC Capstone Report is featured each Tuesday morning on Tide 102.9, The Morning Blitz with Martin Houston. You can listen live at Tide1029.com.
Well, here in our first segment, we're going to take a look at a review and update of our first couple of weeks of spring practice. On this Alabama football, we always kind of love to get back in the swing of things and get back in a full contact sport. And these first couple of weeks, they've been out there working in shells and working on schemes and basics, getting ready for their first scrimmage, which will be coming up this Saturday, leading up this Saturday. And so far, there's been several things come out of the first couple of practices. It looks like the team is looking well. There's been a lot of Coach Saban has had a couple of press conferences where he's been really pleased with the way the team is adapting to the getting back to the Alabama factor. It looks like that what he's talked about has come to pass. We have some leaders that are stepping up in positions and being those leaders on the field. He talked about a couple on offense. He talked about Tua increasing his leadership ability, being able to be that individual on the field in workouts and all during the off seasons and onto the field in practice, where he's really stepped up. There's been times where Tua spoke about himself being a leader this year and being an example for those behind him, like Mac Jones, his brother Talia, and Paul Tyson. And so it's just been opportunities for him. He even spoke about when he steps on that field that he's not his brother any longer. He's competing against another teammate, and he treats him like a teammate. So it seems like a business decision, business as usual for the Alabama football team, coming on and working in the spring, having players to step up and bring that leadership mentality that we may have lacked at some point last year. Coach Saban also talked about Shyheim Carter, about how he had been just a example in the weight room of attitude and discipline and doing everything he was supposed to do off the field to come back and be ready for the spring practice. He seems to have showed out in spring practice with his physique. He seems to be in great tip-top shape. He appears to be doing really good in the workouts and everything that he's been asked to do. Coach Saban also talked about the young players coming along and using the older guys as examples and working into the rotations at different spots. He said a couple of things that he spoke about on offense seemed to let us believe that there may be a lack of depth in the tight end. We knew that. We spoke about it other times where they've moved Cameron Latou over to tight end, working out at tight end. And I think he is just trying to fill spots and trying to fill voids there at tight end position. And I believe that he's doing that in several ways. He's even gone off the field in the recruiting process and has got a preferred walk-on coming on in 2019. That's going to be a diamond in the rough that might help in that as well. But to me, I believe that's one of the areas that Coach Saban talked about as being just a little thin on the offensive side of the ball that they've been working on these first 2 weeks of practice. Another area seems to be running back. He talked about some other guys stepping up besides Najee Harris and Brian Robinson, both of them carrying that load in there. But then some other guys behind them stepping up. You got Jerome Ford coming along and other players that are behind them to play. And he mentioned even the move of Tre'Davious Townsend over there from wide receiver. And that's an interesting move because Tre'Davious Townsend did so great last year in the spring practice. It looked like he was going to push for playing time. But the freshmen and the sophomores in the receiving corps did so well, there just wasn't a place for him to get in there and make a contribution. So he has an opportunity to maybe move over and help fill some of the lack of depth that we have in the running back at least until the ones we signed in the recruiting class comes in the summer. So it looks like on offense that they've got some leaders that's kind of risen up. Some of the things on defense that he's talked about a little bit. Dylan Moses has really taken on the mantle of the play caller and the defensive signal caller. It looks like that he is in a position to step up and make some strides as being a leader there. He's not maybe as vocal as some of the other team leaders have been, but through his play and his work in the off season and his work in the early spring practices, that show that he's going to be that leader to step up. I think Shyam Carter is working on defense as well to be a leader there. Some news that came out this week is they're going to back off on Terrell Lewis. And some folks have questioned, did he re-injure himself? Did he tweak his knee? Or what is the deal? I haven't heard anything about any new injury on Terrell Lewis. What I think happens is when you go back to working on the field after you've had an injury and trying to push yourself in these early workouts, sometimes you get some residual soreness, some swelling that takes place. And I think they're just going to kind of baby that injury all through the spring, get him back full force ready, and rehabbing and working in the summer workouts before getting ready for the fall. So I've heard nothing on any new injury for Terrell Lewis. But overall, coming out of the first 2 weeks of spring practice has been a very big positive for Alabama. So I look forward to them to get well and get ready to have that first scrimmage. I think they're all ready to hit the ground running that first scrimmage Saturday to kind of see what they have. One thing I thought was interesting is some of the talks from the players coming out of the spring is they love spring ball because they go ones on ones and twos on twos. So you got good on good the whole time. It's not going against a scout team or going against the second team. The first team defense is going against first team offense, and I think that's the way they like it. They say iron sharpens iron, and that's what's taking place. And I believe that that's exactly where you've seen this team kind of stretch in leadership and stretch in character and integrity and discipline. In these spring practice, we have the ones going against the ones. So that's something to look at too as we roll into that first scrimmage that's coming up this Saturday on the 30th. Well, let's look at what can we look to see? What do we hope to see out of the first scrimmage? It's a spring scrimmage, so what do you want to see? Now, those aren't open to the public, but there'll be some stats released, and we'll be able to talk about it next week as to what we saw coming out of that spring scrimmage. And I think this one is for, if you're a member of the Red Elephant Club, you'll get the chance to go and see, and there'll be an opportunity for you to look and see what's going on with the team. Well, first of all, I think you got to look at the coachings and see what those coaches are going to bring, what the coaching change is going to bring to the scrimmage. And in the first place, you want to look is the offensive coordinator, Steve Sarkisian. You want to see what is the base offense we're going to be running. I think it's going to be important for us to see what's the run-pass ratio. What sets are we going to run out of? Are we going more to a play-action pass and run-first offense as opposed to an RPO? That'll give us an idea in this first scrimmage of where we're kind of headed in our offense. I think everybody wants to know that. How will Tua bounce back from his performance in the national championship game? With the interceptions and will he have an opportunity to just make a stride and to improve, and we'll see some improvement in the offseason as well. We'll look at that in our offense. And how will our offensive line gel? Who are going to be those first 5 offensive linemen? Coach Saban wants to play his best 5. Does that mean that some of our tackles, like Matt Womack, who's played tackle for us, is going to move over and play guard? We have Alex Leatherwood and Jedrick Wills as the tackles. Who's going to be the other center? Who's going to be the guard playing with them coming back? So I think that's going to be important. And then who's going to carry the load for the running backs? Najee Harris and Brian Robinson, how will they look on the offense? And then how will the passing game to work in all the athletic receivers that we have? Who's going to get worked in that area? And is there going to be anybody come in that first scrimmage that we're going to hear a name that we haven't heard called out? That's all the things you want to look for in your first scrimmage. You want to come out of there with an opportunity to see where you are, make it be a good yardstick to where you've come from. And I think that's going to be a big part of this first scrimmage of where we are with our coaching staff on the offense and what they bring to the table as far as our schemes offensively. I think defensively, you have to look first at the defensive coordinator too, Pete Golding. Everything I've heard coming out of these first 2 weeks of spring practice is everybody on the defensive side of the ball is excited to play for Pete Golding. I think he's going to, being the head man this year, being no controversy, no question on who's calling the plays. I think he is going to bring an excitement, a passion, if you will. You throw Charles Kelly and you throw you throw Charles Kelly in there and Sal Sunseri in there. I think it's so important for that passion to be trickled down to all your players, and it starts with the head guy. So what I'm hearing is he's done that. He's going to come in there, and this defense is going to play with fast. It's going to play with passion, and it's got a really good leader in Pete Golding. So everything I've heard is good coming out of there. So how will they do? I know they're going to line up, and it's the base defense that we've always run. But who's going to be across the front? Who's going to be your starters as they line up there in that first scrimmage on front? It's going to be Raekwon Davis, LeBron Ray, Fadarian Mathis. That's what we're all thinking. And then who's going to be your outside linebackers? Is Yabi Anoma going to step up and make all the potential that we think he has there? Is in the middle linebacker position, who's going to be that second person to come in and play with Dylan Moses? Would it be Josh McMillan? Is it going to be Mikael Benton? Is it going to be somebody else to step up? Is Ali Cahoe back to a point where he can step up and contribute? So those are things you want to look at as you go into that first scrimmage to see what we hear from the defense coming out. And then in our secondary, you want to see what is this new dynamic of having Carl Scott and Charles Kelly and Coach Saban all coaching in the secondary? How is that going to affect us? What's that going to be like as we come out with our safeties and our corners and our dime nickel packages? Who are all going to be in the rotation to start and to play in the spring? Give you an idea of where we are. But overall, you want to come out of this scrimmage, number one, with no injuries. And you want to come out here limiting your mistakes on both sides of the ball. And you want to come out here with an idea of you got your base offense and your basic defensive positions in. And you got your ones on ones and your twos on twos, so you can determine what the pecking order is. You're going to be at least coming out of spring ball. And then finally, you want to look at your new freshmen that were reported here in January and how they can mesh with this team, how they mesh and come up to the level of playing with these team members will say a long way on how they'll be able to contribute down the road. So having some of their names called out of this scrimmage, hearing them talked about would bode well for their playing time later in the year. And I think of those freshmen, we're looking at Antonio Alfano, how he gets in on the defensive line and where he can play. Shane Lee, Scooby Carter, those players that are there, they have a chance to contribute this fall. How they do in this first scrimmage, if their name is called or something says about them coming out of it. If you hear some people talking about them, I think that'll bode well for the fact that they have a chance to contribute. So the upcoming scrimmage is going to be exciting. Let's get back on the field, see what the team looks like, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the reports coming out of there, the ones that the media is allowed to release, and also the statistics that get released as well. This will give us a good yardstick, good measuring stick of where we are getting ready for the fall. Well, in the final and third segment today, I want to talk a few minutes here about some names that I've been hearing coming out of the first couple of weeks of practice that you don't have to often hear, and it's a great thing. It's a good thing to hear. Talked earlier about Shyheim Carter being talked about being a leader and Dylan Moses on defense being a leader. They've really stepped up in spring practice, and we talked about Terrell Lewis and called his name out because of his backing off on. But two players I've been hearing about in spring practice is Yabi Anoma is one of them. He's really upped his game. Looks like he's got his head on straight. Looks like he's playing up to his 5-star potential. So look for him to come in and really contribute. He's got some range of motion. He's got some speed, and really getting back forth, especially to the sidelines. It's a very important for him to be able to grasp the defense, I think. And so coming out of this first scrimmage, the much playing time he gets and how he plays, if it translates from what he's doing in practice, he ought to be able to contribute and do well. Another thing I'm hearing is that Josh Jobe has really upped his game at the corner position to a point where, got Trayvon Diggs coming back, you got Patrick Surtain coming back, that one of those three, two of those three are going to start at corners, and the other one is going to be playing your nickel package, dime package. So, the star position. So, there's opportunities here for Josh Jobe to get on the field and play a lot. He was well thought of last year, and everything I'm hearing about these first couple of practices, his name's been called a lot as somebody to watch. Another person on defense that I'm hearing about that I heard a lot about last year on the scout team is Christian Barrymore. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. It looks like he's been able to really come in and make a difference on the defensive line when he gets in there, and been looking really good coming in, and I'm really excited about what he can do. On the offensive side of the ball, the one thing that's really intrigued me this week is that the move of Chadarius Townsend. I was really high on Chadarius Townsend out of the last spring. And everybody remembers the last spring game, he really had a great touchdown pass that he caught and really ran away from a lot of other players, and I looked for him to contribute. Well, it didn't pan out last year because we had Jalen Waddle come up and do so good as a freshman, and the other sophomore receivers, Devonta Smith, Henry Ruggs, and Jerry Jeudy, there was just no room for Chadarius Townsend to really break in. So this year, as I talked about earlier in the second segment, he's moved over to taking some reps at running back. I really believe this is a place where we can have that scat back, that change of pace back, kind of like Josh Jacobs, catching the ball really well out of the backfield and running the ball. I think if he can get his blocking assignments, up to par, then we might really see a place for Chadarius Townsend to start in the spring, making himself a niche, and then carrying it over into the fall. That next year, come first game, he might be one of that third down back or that third rotation back to come in and really make a difference in the passing game out of the backfield. The reason I say that is Coach Sarkisian is well known for throwing the ball to his backs out of the backfield and putting in positions of playmakers to make passes. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Chadarius Townsend in the backfield, sometimes catching the ball out of the backfield, or maybe see Henry Ruggs or Jalen Waddle working out of the backfield, catching the ball out of the backfield as well. So in any event, I think he is a name that I'm hearing coming on the offensive side of the ball that might be able to make a difference. Also, we're hearing a little bit about Miller Forstall. It appears to be that he's back to his old self after his knee injury and able to really make a difference in the tight end. I think seeing how he does in his first scrimmage will be just something to look for. But those names coming out of spring practice is what everybody I've heard talk about. On offense, Chadarius Townsend and Miller Forstall. On defense, Josh Jobe. I really think Josh Jobe and Christian Barrymore, I really think look for them in the first scrimmage and see if they get their name called or if we hear anything about them making a difference in this first scrimmage that takes place on March the 30th. Well, as we close out the podcast today, I know this is a podcast on Alabama football, but all of our Alabama fans out there know about the other sports. We got some great sports that are doing well in Alabama. If you hadn't had a chance to take a look at the softball team, it's only lost one game. It's great. Baseball has really done well in picking up the pace this year. I've seen some baseball games. The gymnastics team has made it to the NCAAs again, doing well. And we got a rowing team and tennis team that are doing well as also. One thing that's on everybody's mind that follows basketball is, Avery Johnson's been relieved of his duties, coming to mutual parting this past week, and now we're in this coaching search. If you listen to the podcast, I'll always talk about Alabama football, but as this coaching search is going on, I'll give you an update. Looks like it's just getting started. Yesterday, Greg Byrne announced that he's going to look for a coach with college experience that will maintain the integrity of Alabama, which means they don't have any NCAA sanctions or any other scandals in their past. They're going to have good academics, and they're going to be great recruiters. And so I think that's kind of where he's laid out. Right now, I'm hearing several names. Fred Hoiberg, his name's thrown out there. Steve Prohm at one time, but he signed a contract today. So if you listen to this podcast, he recently signed a contract. I think his name's out of the running. And then somebody else, Thad Matta, is a coach that used to coach at Ohio State. He retired or resigned for injury reasons. He'd hurt his back. Seemed his health is better. Last year he was up for the Georgia job, didn't take it. Being in Alabama might be a good place for Thad Matta if you want somebody with coaching experience of taking teams to the NCAA on many occasions and is a good recruiter. Somebody like Thad Matta might be somebody you look at. But I don't think Greg Byrne's going to look just for the big names. He'll look for names that are up and comers. He did a great job in picking Brad Bohannon out. He's really brought this baseball team up, a big turnaround in 1 year. So look for Greg Byrne. He said, hey, I am the search committee. I am the search team. I'm the search firm. It's on me. So if all these names I'm throwing out here, he said, if you don't hear it from him, don't believe it. So let's look for in the podcast to come. I'll give you a little update on basketball at the end of each podcast to let you know where the coaching search is. All right, that's all for today. Thank you for listening to DC Capstone Report. Until next time, this is David signing off.